Okay, so I'm gonna try to make this video again. I've talked for 15 minutes plus on end about this topic a couple of times now, and the shit didn't record. So hopefully this does, and there's nothing nothing funky with it. But I wanted to talk about Guillermo Rigondeaux and where he goes from here. There's a little bit of speculation on different sides of the matter as to what Rigondeaux should do. There's a lot of people that are so pissed at him for quitting that they want him to drop off the face of the earth, and there's other people that hated him to begin with and they want him to drop off the face of the earth. I'm a boxing fan, so I like to see the best fight the best, and my main critique of Rigondeaux all the way up until the Lomachenko fight, and it kind of still stands really, was simply that he was not fighting his best available contenders at 122 pounds while he was there. Even after the whole dramatic situation that happened between him, Top Rank, and HBO, and even after the situation with regards to Santa Cruz, Frampton, and Quigg, there was a lot of really good fighters that even Santa Cruz, Frampton, and Quigg themselves did not fight at 122, and as well as other contenders that were kind of filling in the division and replenishing it in terms of high-level talent that I think he could have fought, other than the likes of Adrian Francisco and Hisashi Yamagata. But be that as it may, in spite of the fact that it would appear to myself and to some others at the very least that there was quite a bit of wasted time there, a bit of wasted talent. I guess the both things in the one and the same, essentially. You can make up for it. You can make up for lost time. Mikey Garcia and Andre Ward recently, they were on the shelf entirely. They weren't even fighting for a couple of years there, and they both made up for it in differing degrees. Ward was able to kind of build up to the Kovalev fights, which he triumphed in, and also the Southern Barrera win is looking better by the day. As Barrera kind of continues to do some damage. Mikey Garcia is, he hasn't wasted very much time. He had his one warm-up bout, had the big championship win and knockout of the year candidate, incidentally, against Dejan Zalticanin, and then went on to defeat Adrian Broner, a very big name, and a guy that had been, a pretty high-level commodity even still at 140 pounds. And now he's going to continue to try and, win titles at multiple weight classes, fighting against Sergey Lipinets next. And then the future may hold, the likes of Jorge Linares, who knows, maybe Vasyl Lomachenko at some point in the future, if Uncle Bobby will let him out to play with the other kids on the block, or the kids on the other block, I should probably say him more accurately. But, there's definitely a lot of opportunity out there for Guillermo Rigondeaux. First things first is I would suggest that he go after the IBF title, and that's at whatever weight class he decides to compete at, whether it's bantamweight, super bantamweight, or featherweight. Go after the IBF belt, because the IBF enforces their mandatories consistently. So if you get yourself in mandated position, you're going to get your shot. You're going to get your shot. The IBF has been at risk of being sued in the past, and they're not looking to go bankrupt anytime soon. So that's the reason why they enforce their mandatories very consistently, as well as the fact that they're based in the U.S., so there are a lot more there's a lot more liability there for people that are litigious that want to make sure that they get their mandated shot to ensure that the IBF plays by the rules, and so incidentally they do. And so the unfortunate side effect of that sometimes is the fact that they'll sometimes recycle champions from other sanctioning bodies simply because they'll get back into contention in the IBF and they'll get their mandated shots. But it's just a fundamental flaw at the end of the day. But that doesn't necessarily affect things from bantamweight to featherweight at the current moment, as it stands at the very least. They've talked a little bit about, there have been a lot of people that claims that Guillermo Rigondeaux can make 118 pounds. Personally, I've always been kind of skeptical of it. I think maybe he potentially can, but wouldn't necessarily make it healthy. It might make him potentially more chinny than he already kind of is, and may affect his stamina and his overall strength, just his overall kind of viability in the fight. So I'm not entirely sure if he'd want to do that. I mean, if he can make it healthy, why not? Just like most other fighters are looking to join as much as they can, and then regain as much as they can. In the midst of the way that the weights, the weigh-in rules are currently standing. why not do it? And try to get yourself an even bigger strength and or power advantage than what you've already got over a majority of the field of opposition. Failing that, though, at super bantamweight and at featherweight, to me, the weakest champions are the IBF champions. Technically, at bantamweight, the weakest champion to me is the IBF champion as well, and Ryan Burnett. I think Zolani Tete and Luis Neri are far more dangerous than he is. But even at super bantamweight, I think Ryosuke Iwasa, he's a guy that's been knocked out in the past by Lee Haskins. Even though he had the big win recently over Yukinori Oguni, I think a big part of that is simply because of the fact that they had a rivalry in the past, and Oguni basically fought the wrong fight. Instead of boxing Iwasa, just like he was able to pretty much outbox and school Jonathan Guzman to win that belt, he went into the fight with Iwasa against a bigger puncher in Iwasa, trying to knock Iwasa's fucking head off. He didn't like Iwasa, so he went in there trying to do some damage to him, and he got it bit him in the ass. He got knocked out in turn. And then the same thing with Lee Selby at featherweight. Lee Selby generally been kind of inactive. Has fought pretty dire opposition, if I do say so myself. Probably the worst kind of field of contenders of any other guys that have been fighting at featherweight. And he's a guy that I think he struggles to make the weight as well. Had a lot of issues versus Fernando Montiel. And so I think Rigondeaux could actually give him quite a few issues as well, and also maybe kind of catching Selby at the right time, due to the fact that Selby has had some trouble making the weight. He's very tall for the weight. He comes in there looking almost like Brandon Rios did back at lightweight, almost like Skeletor on the scale. Although I guess Selby may wind up having to fight his Mandatory and Josh Warrington at some point in the near future, and even then, that would be good money in the UK. Just like, Iwasa would be pretty good money in Japan for Rigondeaux. And, from there he could potentially build a legacy beyond what's happened with Lomachenko. At the end of the day, the Lomachenko fight was kind of a low-risk, high-reward fight in a sense, insofar as you can make the excuse, Lomachenko was just too big, and things like that. And you could kind of still make that claim, regardless of, the whole issue of quitting or whether or not Lomachenko really used that strength advantage in the actual fight. He did to a certain degree, but not overwhelmingly so, not overtly so. He did it primarily to keep Rigondeaux from being able to kind of latch hold and clinch him, essentially, and be able to kind of outfight him on the inside. Although Rigondeaux's skills on the inside, to me, have always been a bit dubious, a bit questionable. But there's some really good fights out there for him. Whether it's at bantamweight, like I said, if he's able to make the weight, between Ryan Burnett, Rodrigo Guerrero, Emmanuel Rodriguez, unless Rodriguez goes the route of the WBC, which it's looking like it might be likely that he does. And then you got the likes of Naoya Inoue moving up into the division. You still got Tete out there, like I said, Neri, as long as Neri's able to make the weight. And then the potential for, who knows, maybe Teresa Kett will move up at some point in the near future. Maybe Quadras will move up in the near future. Kal Yafai, Jaron Akas. All those guys are pretty big super flyweights, in spite of the fact that HBO's almost kind of ban people for leaving super flyweight. At some point, I could see quite a few of those guys competing at bantamweight. So if he's able to make the weight, fair play to him, and there's a lot of good opposition out there for him. Look good high level and big name opposition out there for him. Super bantamweight, high level, not necessarily as big name, but you got the likes of Tomoki Kameda, Marlon Tapales, the recently emerging Isaac Dogboy, who just got the big knockout win over Cesar Juarez. Daniel Roman, who's going to fight Ryo Matsumoto coming up soon for the WBA title. I think the winner of that will probably wind up having to fight the recent Rigondeaux challenger Moises Flores. Ray Vargas with the WBC. Rigondeaux had been given the opportunity to fight Ray Vargas about 2 years ago now, matter of fact. They were trying to see if Rigondeaux wanted to fight for their title, the WBC title at the time. He didn't come to the table when Ray Vargas did. So hey, maybe that fight's still out there for him. And then amongst the WBC contenders, I think they have the nicest field of contenders with regards to Julio Ceja, Diego De La Hoya, Hugo Ruiz still, Gavin McDonald, Tomoki Kameda, the aforementioned Kameda, Randy Caballero, etc. Former champion Randy Caballero. But there's good field of opposition there for him too, and they've talked about the potential for him even fighting at featherweight. So I mean, at that point, you'd be looking at a potential two-weight champion, and there's, like I said, even with Super Bantam and Bantam, the good field of opposition there too. Dangerous field of opposition. I think that's probably the most dangerous route that he could take, because not only for the size differences between the featherweight class currently as it stands and the bantamweight class and the super bantamweight class currently as they stand, but there's some pretty solid featherweights out there as well. Even outside of the champions, Oscar Valdez, Gary Russell Jr., Leo Santa Cruz, Abner Mares, Jesus Rojas, Lee Selby. You got Jojo Diaz. You got Jorge Lara, extremely dangerous Jorge Lara, and a few other pretty solid fighters. Mark Magsayo, Oscar Escandon. I'm trying to think who else is there. Genesis Cervania, interestingly enough, Cervania, who has served as one of the big sparring partners for now Inoue, as Inoue is looking to move up. And then you still got the guys that you kind of missed out on from Super Bantamweight in Frampton and Quigg, who may at some point in the near future be more likely to take that kind of high risk fight against you, simply because of the fact that they've both lost their zero, so they're both not trying to promote themselves off of that anymore. Frampton's going to be fighting Nonito Donaire coming up pretty soon. And so, at that point, why the hell not? Donaire, in his own right, is kind of a high-risk, relatively low-reward opponent in that sense. In terms of his punching power, the fact that he could, if he hits you with that one shot, he's still a big puncher. I do think Frampton will beat him, though. And then I'm pretty certain that Valdez is going to beat down Scott Quigg. I just think that Valdez is kind of a wrong type of opponent for Quigg, even though Valdez has had trouble with guys that are able to kind of provide that nonstop pressure that Quigg does. I think that ultimately Quigg's just going to be walking into too much power against Valdez. Valdez, I think, hits too hard for Quigg's level of defense. But even there, some good. So I think there's a good path for him, especially at featherweight. I mean, there's a good path for him at whatever weight class, and especially if he goes the IBF route, as I mentioned earlier, because like I said, they enforced the mandatory, so they're going to force him as the mandatory, and then they'll enforce the mandatories coming up below him, and so then even the critiques that I've given to him in the past can somewhat be assuaged with regards to him fighting a better field of competition out there. And not just going after only big names or guys, or if these three big name high money value fighters don't fight me, then I'm just gonna fight whatever Tom, Dick, and Harry that doesn't even really belong rated top 10 or top 15, regardless of whether they are or not. But there is a life after Lomachenko. Maybe that's what I'll title this video. I don't know, but. I want to see the guy fight, man. I think he's a really talented fighter, a very skilled fighter, and I want to see those skills put to the test. Ultimately, I want to see all highly skilled fighters put to the test against the stiffest test that can come. And unfortunately for Rigondeaux, he's at an age now where the time is kind of running out with regards to those skills truly being put to the test, as opposed to them kind of deteriorating and degrading, and then at that point, being put to the test, and then, and failing that test only in part, well, not only in part, but due in part to age taking some of the sharpness off of those skills, and allowing for somebody that may not necessarily have that same level of or that same level of degree of sharpness from their primes to be able to overcome that and overcome him, incidentally. But I'm hoping that they get him more active. I'm hoping that Caribe doesn't continue to stand in the way of the guy having a more fruitful career and a more critically acclaimable career than he's had in the recent past. And I want to see him fight some of these high level fighters. Whether they're huge names that all these people from whatever country decide to tune in and see or not. I want to see the best fight the best, and so I want to see the top level guys get shots at the top level guys, Rigondeaux included. So that's it. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.